Welcome to Unit 11, where we are going to talk about statistics. Now, the most important part of this chapter is getting down the vocabulary. We're going to talk about a lot of different vocabulary words today. So that's where we want to start out, so that we all know what we're talking about when we say a word. So we're going to start right here in our vocabulary box with population. A population is all the people you want to know something about. So, what we'll be talking about a lot this chapter are things like surveys. So let's do an example right up here. In Jordan School District, there are currently 11,376 high schoolers. That could be your population, every single high schooler in Jordan School District. However, if I wanted to know something about those high schoolers, so that would be my parameter of interest. That's what we're interested in. So let's say I want to know how many of these high schoolers are taking a CE class, a concurrent enrollment class. So that's my parameter of interest. That's what I want to know. Are you taking a CE class, yes or no? But it's pretty unlikely for me to get to all 11,000 high school students and ask them one by one, are you taking a CE class? That's probably not going to happen. That's a lot of people to talk to, a lot of time, a lot of money and resources to get to all those people. It's just not realistic. So in the case where it's not realistic to talk to an entire population, we have what is called a sample. And that is a small group of people, of the people we're interested in. So for example, maybe I want to know how many students in high schoolers in Jordan School District are taking a CE class, but I just asked the students at Mountain Ridge High School. That's my sample of the entire population. Now, a couple other things we want to talk about. A population parameter versus a statistic. Let's go back to all the students in Jordan School District. Let's say I want to now find out their average ACT score. So that is now my parameter of interest, ACT score. What is your ACT score? Well, if I do somehow manage to go to all of 11,376 high schoolers and I find out what their best ACT score is, that would be called the population parameter, because I was able to ask the entire population. However, in a more realistic situation, you're really going to be asking a sample of your population. It's very rarely realistic to ask your entire population. So in the case where we only ask a sample of our population, and then we use inference to make a conclusion about the entire population. So let's say I ask all the students at Mountain Ridge High School and their average ACT score is a 22. So then I can use statistics to go through and say, well, if my students had an average of 22, then the entire district probably has an average between like 20 and 24. That is statistics, where you take a sample and you infer stuff about the entire population. Not as reliable, but much more realistic. So that is the big ideas behind our first vocabulary words. So what I want you to do is try example number 1. So the Utah State Legislature wants to know what percentage of teen drivers text while driving. They decide to survey 250 randomly selected teen drivers across the state. I want you to pause the video while you identify what is the population, what is the sample population, who they're actually going to ask, and what are they interested in. So pause the video, try answering those 3 on your own with the vocabulary we just went through, and then come back to see how you did. check what you got with what I got. So our population is Utah teen drivers. Make sure you didn't just put teen drivers, because the Utah State Legislature doesn't care about teen drivers in Vermont. They want to know about the teen drivers in the state they're working in. So our population is specifically Utah teen drivers. They're sampling 250 randomly selected teen drivers. And their parameter of interest is, do you text while driving? That's what they want to know. So, while we're talking about this, we want to introduce the next idea we want to learn about, and that is bias. So let's take this example of Utah teen drivers. I'm going to ask 250 teen drivers. Do you think that how I pick those 250 drivers is going to make a difference in my answer? And absolutely. Let's say I pick 250 teen drivers in downtown Salt Lake versus in rural Tooele. That geographic difference of my sample could influence the way that those people answer, because they grew up in different cultures and different lifestyles, and they'll have different answers to this question. So we come to this idea of we want to pick a sample that is truly representative of our population. So maybe picking 5 to 10 people from each county. That is a more representative sample. That would get me more reliable answers. And that comes to this idea. Obtaining a random sample is not as simple as you might think. For example, here it gives you another one right here. If you wanted to know how many students support the athletic program, you probably don't want to interview all the cheerleaders and people on sports teams, because that's a huge bias in the way those people are going to answer that question. So that comes to our next sequence of vocabulary terms, which are the types of sampling methods. We have 6 different sampling methods that we're going to talk about, and all 6 methods have different pros and cons. Some of them are better and more reliable. Some of them are easier to do. So in the next video, that's the next vocabulary we're going to go over. We're going to go over these 6 sampling methods and talk about what's nice about them, what's not.